sudden everybody appeared while I was looking at my page. All right. Let's. We're at health. We've gotten to the health section. Everyone, page 1, finance.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Brandon Nunes, Department of Finance. This first issue is for a request for the Emergency Medical Services Authority for $448,000 general fund to be able to maintain a pharmaceutical cache for their three field mobile hospitals. And on this particular issue, we would support the assembly version.
But the program already has $2 million, 2 plus 2.1 million. Is that? I think we had an error on the agenda. It said 1.7, but it's really 2.1 million.
The adjusted amount is 2.1 million. However, it's our understanding that only 24,000 is available for pharmaceuticals of that amount.
What's the rest used for?
Maintaining the equipment and the hospitals themselves. It's not actually specifically for the pharmaceuticals.
Well, I understand that, but you got $2 million. If you need to prioritize what you spend it on, so be it. I mean, you're spending for a lot of staff, you're spending for storage, and then the pharmaceuticals that you're buying only last 12 months, and then what do you do with them when you don't use them in an emergency?
This would essentially be an insurance policy that would allow them to, you're correct, they do expire within 12 or 18 months depending on the pharmaceutical. This would provide them the ongoing funding that would be necessary to replenish those pharmaceuticals.
But what do they do with it? One of the questions we had when we got to this was, what do they do with it at the end of the 12 or 18 months? We just buy it and toss it when we don't use it?
We could get back to you on that. I'm sure they have a disposal.
I mean, couldn't there be a rotating plan where you after 6 months give it to a hospital or they pay for it or something so that you're not just wasting it?
That's what Lowenthal said, right?
I mean, it
seems like a waste. LAO?
Madam Chair, thank you. Lisa Morawski with the Legislative Analyst's Office. Our understanding is that this is a contract with a pharmaceutical vendor that is managing an ongoing supply of pharmaceuticals. So it's up to them to manage that supply.
So that the supply is always current?
So that the supply is always fresh.
That's correct. And the agreement would be that within 48 hours of a request, those pharmaceuticals would be on hand for the mobile field hospitals in order to be deployed to a disaster site within 72 hours.
But so how have you been funding that for the last, we did this original humongous augmentation, if I recall, in 2006 to do this program. And now, why do you need what did it do this year that you need an augmentation?
This is an augmentation specifically for the pharmaceuticals.
What did we do to pay for pharmaceuticals last year that we need an augmentation this year?
The department indicates that the funding of $24,000 in the past has not been sufficient to be able to provide the pharmaceuticals for the 3 field hospitals. So this would provide the augmentation that would be necessary for them to be fully stocked, or to have the contract in place to allow them to receive.
But they've had a contract in place for 4 years, right?
This proposal has been put forward for 3 years in a row.
And rejected?
And rejected for the last 2 years.
And we currently don't have the pharmaceuticals on hand. So if the mobile field hospitals were deployed, we would, sort of be scrambling to find whatever pharmaceuticals we could from whatever sources they were available from. Well, but since you don't know what that emergency is going to be, isn't that kind of what you got to do anyway? Well, the pharmaceutical cache has a certain stock of pharmaceuticals that are related largely to trauma, which is mostly why the hospitals would be deployed, say in the case of an earthquake scenario or another disaster scenario where you have a lot of trauma victims.
And are these in very short supply? Why is it so hard to get them?
Yeah, can't you get it anytime you call them in 48 hours?
The concern is that they would not be able to. So this ensures that.
Well, has that occurred? You've had this program in place for 4 years. You got $18 million to start it,
Right.
and we haven't had to do that yet.
The field hospitals have not been deployed yet. No. There hasn't been a situation where they've had to be deployed.
Right. So I'm back to why am I spending more money on something that I haven't had to use for?
It's to provide them the operational readiness in case.
Well, it's a great idea as soon as we got enough money, but if you're...
We'll go with the Senate position.
Thank you. Anybody? Where are you?
Ms. Skinner.
Ms. Skinner and then Mr. Nielsen.
I just wanted to support your line of questioning. While, of course, in great times, it would be lovely to have that insurance, but I think given that we're asking everybody to look carefully at their deployment of their funds, I think that under this, they need to look at the allocation they have, and if they need to shift within the allocation they have to give us a little bit better protection around their pharmaceuticals, then that's what they need to do, but I couldn't support this general fund increase at this time.
Mr. Nielsen?
Of analysts, there are multiple agencies that require pharmaceuticals. CDF comes to mind. Does each department individually, or is there some kind of a coordination where multiple departments require necessary pharmaceutical?
Yes, we understand that many departments acquire pharmaceuticals through the Department of General Services. There is a statewide pharmaceutical contract. And we did inquire to EMSA about whether they could be pursued through this means as well.
And they could be, correct?
It's not clear at this time. That's still an outstanding discussion between DGS, the state pharmaceutical vendor, AmerisourceBergen, and the EMSA. We asked them to look into that proposal to see if it could be provided at a lower cost. At this time, the conclusions of those discussions are not known. It's going to be another at least 30 days until we know if it's even feasible and if it would be at a lower cost.
But at least that is a imminent possibility. Is that correct?
It is an alternate option that may be feasible.
Right. Well, Senator Dutton.
So what's delaying them from, I don't understand why it takes them so long to figure it out, yes or no?
It's really the vendor just hasn't been able to get back to them on that yet.
Maybe we need a different vendor.
Well, I'm not sure about that.
How about the folks we get the Medi-Cal rebates from? Can we?
Oh, never mind. I'll go with the Senate.
Senator Huff?
Is there any effort to work with hospitals, with pharmaceutical firms, whatever, to supply something like this as opposed to relying on general fund support all the time? It doesn't seem like a whole lot of money for a statewide program. I'm just wondering if there's a better way to have emergency stockpiles around that are sort of kept fresh by a regular rotation.
Our understanding is that EMSA has pretty close relationships with all of the emergency medical systems across the state, and they put this forward as their best proposal as to how this could be accomplished. I'm not sure. If we could accomplish it for no cost, that would be preferential. But I don't think EMSA thinks that's a realistic proposal.
They've managed to do that for 3 years.
Well, we've just been. We don't have the pharmaceuticals available. We haven't been doing this.
All right. I want the $18 million back if we can't make the program work. But Mr. Blumenfield moves the Senate version. Any objection? None on a 5-0 vote. Senate version is adopted. All right. Where are we? 1115 waiver. I don't know what news anybody has on this front. I don't think this is an item we're going to close. But But Finance, you want to give us some sense of what the current status of this discussion is? Oh, or is that LAO? Is that an LAO handout you got there in your hand? That's for the next issue. For the next issue, okay.
John Wunderlich with the Department of Finance. The issue before us here is staffing for the comprehensive waiver that the state is currently working on renewing with the federal government. The formal waiver proposal was submitted last week to the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and at this stage discussions are beginning with them in terms of what is approvable by the federal government. As it relates to this proposal, the administration's requested 56 positions and $9.5 million, of which $4.1 million is general fund, to implement the waiver. Some of the main components include moving seniors and persons with disabilities into managed care, pilot programs for alternative healthcare delivery models in the California Children's Services Program, integrated alternative behavioral health services, and also pilot programs related to duly eligible beneficiaries, so those eligible for both Medicare and Medicaid. And we're also working with the Department of Managed Health Care to see what, in terms of the managed care piece, could be done within that department, in which case it would be fee-supported rather than general fund supported. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions the committee may have.
LAO?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Meredith Worden with the Legislative Analyst's Office. We would recommend the Senate approach on this proposal. We believe that the department will need additional staff to move forward with implementation of the waiver. We are supportive of the waiver. For example, we have issued a prior report on moving certain individuals, seniors and persons with disabilities, into managed care. This proposal is still in development, as the policy committees will be discussing the various components of the proposal, and so approving some of the staff seems reasonable. We would suggest maybe targeting some of the resources to the managed care proposal and the healthcare coverage initiatives, as the other proposals are a little bit less developed.
But we approved we approved moving toward the mandatory managed care thing a couple of years ago. Didn't we get any staff to do that? I mean, why do we need more now?
That was a part of a budget trailer bill last year, and no staff were provided for that effort.
So has no work been done to implement it?
The department has engaged in some extensive stakeholder processes and has been working to develop the waiver proposal. But in terms of working out all the specifics with plans to make sure the necessary oversight is in place and working out all the contracts, there's still a lot more work that needs to be done above what's been going on currently.
All right. Anybody question Ms. Skinner?
I have some figures on the number of personnel that's been increased in the department over the last 3 fiscal years. But if you all have, do you know what number of people have been, what number of positions were increased?
Now, are we speaking to the department generally? Or related to these waiver efforts?
To the department.
DHS generally.
Okay. The numbers that I have show that in 2007-8, there were 3,200 positions within the department. In 2008-9, 3,090 positions. And in the current year, 3,056 positions. So there's been a gradual decline in staffing.
But are those just vacancies? Or because actually, when I checked numbers, the department had increased total personnel over the last 3 years by 100, 3 fiscal years. And for the purpose of my asking is because there's new positions are not required under the 1115 waiver rules, and while certainly we support the development of the waiver, clearly, it seems like it may be appropriate to ask the department to integrate internal experts that they have for purposes of rolling out the department's plan. And especially given that the waiver needs to happen soon, these positions wouldn't even be filled by the time so that's, I mean, if this were something that's into 2 years from now, then you might justify the new positions because you'd be able to fill them, and then they'd be, but it just doesn't, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Sure. So the data we have from the department does show a decline. They do currently have about a 10% vacancy rate department-wide.
So your numbers are vacant, are filled positions, not total.
The numbers I just provided were total position authority. Right.
Okay.
So we show that they currently do have about a 10% vacancy rate. Likely some of these positions would be filled by internal folks within the department rotating to these functions, and then their positions would then be backfilled. But in terms of our resource requests, there are many significant components. One I did fail to mention previously was an expansion of the current coverage initiative. And we believe these resources are necessary to maintain timeline goals, and otherwise there may be some delay in achieving some of the waiver objectives.
Would you, if you have a 10% vacancy rate, could we just fill that and solve our problem with that?
Right. Filling those vacant positions would be one option. Because of the workforce cap plan, which is increasing department salary savings, there would still be some funding needed, so the department would be funded to fill those positions.
Well, I mean, the half certainly is, I mean, I don't know. I mean, if you did the half and then you could see whether you go back to what the natural vacancy rate, which is usually 5%. Let's see if you get there, LAO. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to note that the department's estimate, and I think also the Senate proposal, does assume 25% salary savings, recognizing that the positions won't be filled. And we would just note that these are expanded activities relative to the current 1115 waiver.
Yes. Orlando? Yeah.
In subcommittee, as LAO has just explained, we approached it with a phase-in style, recognizing the points that Assemblywoman Skinner was just making, but that the significant importance of the work on this waiver is such that we didn't want to understaff the effort. So this was, we thought, a reasonable approach and one that would be sufficient with a phase-in opportunity.
All right. Does this go with some other things? Do we need to leave it open to do things, or is there? I mean, because there'll be some of these positions in DMHC too, right? Or the fees could come in there.
Right. At this time, the proposal is all within DHCS, but we're working to see how that can be revised to put some of these fees supported in DMHC.
Oh, I see. Because then in there we could get the fees, and some of these positions might be fundable thereby. So maybe we want to keep it open to make sure those two go together. Yeah. After we get to the Medi-Cal managed care piece. Yeah. I mean, as we work on, everybody wants to make the managed care Medi-Cal piece work. So trying to merge those two together so you get one proposal out of it might be helpful. We'll see. All right. So we'll leave it open for a moment. All right. LAO's got a proposed compromise, I think.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Farah Brock with the Legislative Analyst's Office. Hopefully the handout will be coming to you shortly. We have a proposed compromise on the trailer bill language that was adopted by both houses for the monitoring of the Medi-Cal claims processing system. This is a system known as CAMUS. The two proposed languages, they were very similar, so we blended them together, and primarily what our compromise does is it provides for quarterly reporting by the department on the project status reports and also on the project's budget. They would also provide copies of oversight reports and planning documents, updates on planning documents to the JLBC, and there would also be the Office of the Chief Information Officer. They would be providing oversight of the contract as well.
Is there question, comment, Assembly? Yeah, Mr. Blumenfield?
Well, on the Assembly trailer language, we involved the BSA. we think that's very important. Why is that not on the conference? On
We
the
didn't
LAO?
include that in our proposal. As was discussed earlier by this committee, that was actually an issue related to IT contracts and oversight of involving the BSA and OCII. That was something that was kicked to policy committee by you guys. We think that is something that should be considered by the policy committees. No, you didn't close it, but it was discussed at that time. Sorry. It was discussed as to whether or not that should be considered by policy committees. Pulling in the BSA has a different element to it. This is not just an IT contract. It's largely a services contract. So we thought it was something that should be considered by the policy committees and not incorporated in this language.
But it was our policy committee that discussed it, right?
Yeah. Well,
Go ahead, Ms. Skinner. Did you want?
This was adopted by the budget subcommittee of the Assembly.
Correct,
Yeah.
and they're not the full, right, but they are a
Correct.
budget sub over this area and this area only. And
Correct.
they did recommend that the BSA be included.
They did, and we thought that if that's a path that the legislature starts going down, we thought it should be open to a broader discussion where there are considerations made if the BSA should be involved, what should their role specifically be, what should the role of the OCIO be. It just begs a broader discussion was what our thought was, particularly as related to IT contracts, but then this is not just an IT contract,
Correct.
it's actually a services contract with an IT component.
Part of the thing with the BSA is that usually you want to prioritize those through JLAC somehow, and if you need an
It's a
audit,
typical process, yeah.
I just didn't know how to include them in this. I get the concern people have about having LAO, BSA had eyes on
JLAC,
what's going on with this deal because it was sort of controversial.
Okay.
But I'm always more concerned in IT and getting the OCIO in. And if we're getting JLBC quarterly participation, it seemed to us that
I guess the reason, I mean, BSA is sort of an independent piece to it. Otherwise, it's all the administration looking at it. It's sort of not necessarily the fox watching the chicken coop, but it's basically all in the same group. BSA provides a little bit of independence, and that's why we really felt it was important to have them included in the process. And it doesn't, and having this kind of language doesn't preclude further legislative refining down the road in terms of how we do it. The language is pretty broad, but I think it's pretty important to get that extra accountability in, because these are very large contracts, and the oversight, I don't think anyone would argue with the need for additional oversight.
Madam Chair.
quarterly's on there. Okay, Senator Dutton and then Mr. Nielsen.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I actually was kind of leaning towards the Assembly solution, although the LAO compromise doesn't bother me. But to what Assembly Member Bloomfield just said, I think that is a big problem we've had with a lot of our IT projects, a lot of these different components and stuff. It just seems like there's something not happening, and I think BSA actually may provide us with a little bit better independent oversight as to what's going on. We just seem to be having a really difficult time. Even when we have money that's provided by the federal government to update some of our systems, like with EDD and stuff, we seem to be having a challenge here. So that's the reason I was kind of interested in the Assembly's proposal. But anyway.
I guess our question, maybe we'll just leave it open and try to think about it some more. I mean, I'm reasonably inclined toward the LAO version, but I get what you're trying to do, but I don't know how to. The audit, to me, has always been a JLAC function, and it's a separate thing. And adding the auditor into a whole bunch of budget stuff, when you already have a JLBC and you already have other reporting mechanisms and OSA, I assume, whatever. I mean, I get the idea of having a legislative oversight, but that's what the JLBC was for. Quarterly reports to the legislature is pretty aggressive. I mean, and I just don't know how to think about how you put BSA role on an ongoing basis in something. One thing is when we say, auditor, go forth and tell us whether these folks are meeting what they need to do. And you could maybe ask for an audit that does that, but there are resources associated with BSA, and we don't want to. Usually you sort that out in JLAC, so I just don't know how to think about the overlap between the two.
I mean, my concern is we're talking about $30 billion worth of claims that are going through this system. I mean, it dwarfs everything else, and getting that oversight would just make we all want to do more oversight as a legislature, and getting that kind of input and that regular reporting would make me much more comfortable.
The quarterly reports are here. The question is how you would use an auditor to add to that or not add to that or something, I think is part of the question. It's not typical for the auditor to do that, and so...
To look at the timeline, I mean, because I know when we call them for our committees, and, in terms of, it's hard to know what milestones they're meeting. Are they meeting those milestones, the timeframes? And we can leave it open and work together on it.
Try to think about it. Mr. Nielsen?
Well, I'm leaning toward the Assembly version with Bureau of Audits. I mean, haven't been down the trail as I have in corrections with some vast overruns of these kinds of projects, completely out of control.
Well, that's true.
I'm very sensitive to that kind of independent authority. I mean, if the chair prefers to leave it open, fine, but I am prepared to move the Assembly language.
Well, I'd have to look at their specific... I mean, it's this intersection of how to use the auditor that makes me nervous as much as anything, and I don't know how to have the auditor reporting quarterly when she normally does like an audit and then moves on. If you're building an auditor into an ongoing quarterly process forever, that's a different kind of animal than has ever been done before with them. I mean, I don't know how to think about that. Ms. Skinner?
Well, as you think about it, there might be a way to sunset. I mean, obviously my colleagues have already expressed this, but I think it's not only the fact that this is such a huge contract, it's also the reality that we're making a shift. We had one vendor for, I think it was close to 20 years,
right,
and no comment on, whether...
With no auditor and no oversight and no nothing.
Yeah, and so then we're going to make a shift, and we've not had any experience with this new vendor. It may turn out great, but, it's a huge risk. And I don't see where we even see that. So it just seems to me that the more we build in to give us some safeguards, the better, even if we have a sunset on those. So you might think about that. But I'm happy, I would much prefer either the Assembly's version or the LAO compromise with the addition of the Bureau of State Audits with oversight.
If we can figure out a way to make the audit thing, the auditor has a cost, and then you got to build that in too. So you can't. We'd have to talk to her to find out if she can even do that.
Is it possible to do a biannual rather than a quarterly? That saves a little bit.
Well, I think the idea was the aggressive oversight. That's why the quarterly, at least to the JLBC, to deal with the issues Ms. Skinner was raising about this is a change in who we've done business with for 30 years, and it's a change in platform. It's a whole, right, Finance? It's a whole, you bought a new deal, right? A new contract or a new
There's
system.
a new contract that, as a part of the contract, they will be replacing the 30-year-old Camus infrastructure, so IT infrastructure system. We are supportive of the LAO compromise proposal.
Okay.
We would also note that the proposal references reports prepared by oversight contractors, and the department is working on finalizing a contract with an independent project oversight. And some of the things that will be included in those reports that will be provided quarterly to the legislature include evaluating project development and implementation compared to the system design and timeline submitted by the vendor, monitoring and testing the system's ability to function and handle volume, evaluating the department's ability to implement the project, establishing and implementing methods to measure the department's ability to monitor project priorities, schedules, and stakeholder involvement, among other things.
Well, I think the issue the Assembly's raising that I guess we need to think about is if you're asking them to do all those things, but it's being done by the same people who are administering the contract, how do we get independent eyes on it?
And
that's the issue.
Right, and we're happy to make those reports publicly available as well.
Well, that's fine, but the point is the department's reporting on its own activities.
Who does
so the question is, how do you structure that so that it works?
The department's finalizing a contract with an outside independent vendor who would do that oversight and reporting.
Madam Chair?
That's the problem.
If we can't move the Assembly version, I would suggest that maybe staff can come back with the anticipated costs that independent contract would cost, and let's weigh those against what the BSA would provide.
Or even the cost of the Bureau of State Audits. I mean, it's either the LAO, the Bureau. I get what folks are trying to do. I like the OCIO looking at these things because my experience, like Mr. Nielsen's on these projects, is they've been horrible, but now we have this OCIO who's actually pretty good and is keeping folks a little better in line, and they actually understand tech projects, and I like to have them in review of those contracts, because often they can intervene quickly and get something fixed before it gets too far down the road. But how you get the report either done, peer-reviewed, I mean, some kind of way that the issue I think they're raising is the problem between the person who's administering the contract writing the report on how the contract's being administered. So maybe it is you could go to semi-annual if you use the auditor. I don't know how to think about that. I mean, based off of, I think the LA compromise is in the right direction, and whether we add a component to it or not is out there. Ms. Conway?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this is what frustrates people, is that we do these big changes and then there's no so I like the Assembly version. I could vote for that right now, because it's just a frustration to the people that we serve, that we switch this contract up and then we let them monitor themselves. I don't know.
Yeah, the monitor, I see.
I'm ready to move
monitor themselves. So let's just leave it open and see if we can find a way to, something like that. Some way of incorporating, and the essence is some way of incorporating an independent oversight into the process that the LAO has. The compromise language, I think, is okay on language basis, but how do we get BSA or somebody in there to be the monitor of it or something? Let's just think about it. All right, let's just leave it open until we sort that out. That's all. I don't want to do it without talking to the auditor. I'm concerned about it. All right. Until the auditor gets done with the redistricting process, I'm not a real fan of piling work on it. But Mr. Blumenfield?
BSA does have oversight on FisCal, which is, so there is a precedent.
No, well, yeah.
I mean, it's not, and child support. So it's FisCal, child support. So it's not like we're inserting them in a completely new way. I mean, there's...
Yeah, okay. Well, it's just, because we had them do big reports at one point, and then they follow those up, and it's just a different... And right now, while she's stretched thin on redistricting, it's a little bit tricky to add things for her.
And we could build in the costs and that kind of...
All right. Next, page 4. Targeted case management.
The governor's budget included $890,000, half federal funds, half local funds, so no state general fund, to fund 8 two-year limited term positions to meet some federal auditing requirements. The issue is that there are $37.2 million in claims that have been paid out to local governments providing these targeted case management services. And CMS, the federal government, requires that we meet certain auditing requirements. If we do not meet those requirements, we are at risk of the federal government recovering those funds from the state. And then
how much? $37 million?
$37.2 million. And so our proposal is for 8 two-year limited term positions to address this workload.
We hate new positions.
We recommend the Senate version to better ensure that the feds are recovered from the federal government.
What's the risk?
Or reimbursed.
The $37 million is at risk if we don't comply with CMS audit requirements. It's a lot of risk. Any objections? Senator Huff moves the Senate version. I don't know how you feel. Right?
I got a question.
Senator Dutton?
Skinner's question.
No, Skinner, Ms. Skinner. Sorry.
My understanding is that the counties would have to pay, like if we go, for example, with the governor's proposal or what you're recommending, it's we're in effect placing a burden on the counties, correct? They would have to fund these positions.
That's correct.
That's correct, but the counties are also the ones who would lose out the $37.2 million if we don't meet the auditing requirements.
We're asking them to help pay for the positions that are necessary to audit what they're doing in order to keep their money.
Yeah.
Right.
But my understanding is the counties have indicated objection. In other words, they're not in full support. So I think we'd have to understand, do they fully understand that they would lose these federal funds if they don't have these positions? And
I presume they understand that. When they raised the issue in committee, it was a concern that it didn't take as many staff to do the workload that was being proposed. And we reviewed the workload and looked at the number of staff requested, and we thought it seemed reasonable based on the workload that was outstanding. So it's a difference of what they think is necessary to get the job done.
They're only a 2-year limited term to deal with the backlog that's 5 years long, right? It's sort of reviewing 5 years' worth of claims. So you put them on limited term.
Right. The backlog goes back to 2004-05, and so we've requested the limited term because that's the intent of the positions, is to catch up with the workload.
How did we get so far behind? Who's not doing their job now that we got behind? Somebody somewhere. I mean, I'm okay with the part where the counties pay to reimburse to have us audit their own. I mean, it's them who are the claims they're doing that we're paying for, right?
Exactly. And I believe there was an issue where we had sent the claims to the federal government. They started finding some errors with the claims that had been submitted. And then they said to the state, you need to actually look at all these claims much more closely to ensure that we're actually reimbursing you for things that we really should be reimbursing you for. So now the state is asking for additional staff so that we can provide the scrutiny of the claims that the feds are asking us to provide.
Yeah, and the claims are originated, if you will, from the counties, right? And so it's us reviewing the county claims to give the federal government peace of mind.
Assurance that it's correct.
Yeah. All right, Senator Dutton.
Oh, gosh, I really wanted to keep my mouth shut today.
Take that computer away.
But what you just now said when you asked the question, well, who's responsible? You know, that's part of the problem we have. I would prefer to go down the assembly line, the assembly position, because it's less positions, and I believe that we probably get it done. But the same token, you know, I don't want to end up causing all these problems because I understaffed something because I underestimated the workload. But I don't mind going down that path, but then I need somebody to be held accountable. I can't, when we finally say who's responsible, and then you just get nothing but blank looks on your face. I mean, that doesn't make, I can't keep doing this. Somebody's got to be responsible, and I just need some accountability, and I need something. We need to come up with something. We can't do it right now with this item, but before this is over, God, we got to come up with something so that somebody is held to some level of accountability, for God's sake.
But I don't know.
I'm speaking of frustration.
Yeah. All right. Senator Huff had moved the Senate version. Is it? Are you there yet, or you want to hold it open? You think it's too many positions? All right.
Leave it open.
We're not there yet. Let's leave it open. We'll see if we can. I mean, I do think the part about the county paying for it, since they're the ones who cause the problem, is not inappropriate. But how you set it up is.
I think we need to get with the county a little bit.
Yeah, okay.
Counties.
There's a handout, proposed conference compromise on the page 5. Somebody got the handout?
Yeah, I have it.
Oh, has everybody's got one? Okay, I just thought maybe they had to hand it out. Proposed compromise, LAO, you want to?
It's actually a compromise financial I present. Yeah.
Finance?
So in this one, it's where we need positions to audit billings for local education agencies, and the department has worked with stakeholders to phase in the positions more gradually, and so the total number of positions would be the same, but funding would be reduced, and to add some budget bill language to specify how funds are withheld to fund the staffing. And so this is something the department has come to a consensus with stakeholders.
Okay.
We're fine with the compromise.
LAO says okay. Anybody have any objections to the proposed conference compromise? Hearing none. On a 5-0-5-0 vote, that will be adopted. See, we like those. All right. Page 6. Do we have another compromise here? Finance, I think we have everybody's got this proposed conference compromise on page 6. Yes, ma'am. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, he wasn't physically here. I said 5-0 and I lied. All right. It was 4-0, and we will allow Mr. Blumenfield to add on when he returns. Sorry. Roll doesn't need to be held open. That was my fault. He was here. He was here a minute ago. I know he's in the room. Yeah, there he is. All right. And we'll just add them on right now. Mr. Blumenfield, while you were stepped out, we approved the proposed conference compromise. So you're okay with it, right?
Yes.
5050. Okay. Page 6, another proposed conference compromise. Good work, Finance.
So this proposal would move geographic managed care negotiations from CMAQ to the Department of Healthcare Services, and associated with that is a request to transfer staff one position. So CMAQ would be reduced by one position in $69,000 general fund, and the Department of Healthcare Services would be increased by one position in $59,000 general fund because their position is slightly less expensive that we would be adding on there for a net general fund savings of $10,000.
All right. Is there any LAO, you're okay? One position moved, so it's not an increase, it's moved one from the other because we're moving the function from one place to the other. Without objection, on a 5-0 vote, that will be adopted. All right, page 7. This will conform to something somewhere. What page?
It's on page 14.
It will conform when we get to 14.
Okay.
Whatever we do there. All right, page 8. This is the Medi-Cal Managed Care. Finance?
So as a part of the waiver, we are looking to move seniors and persons with disabilities into managed care beginning in the budget year. This was also a part of our broader cost containment proposal. And this proposal specifically relates to moving them into managed care and also deferring one capitated payment at the end of the budget year for geographic managed care and 2 Plan County managed care plans.
Madam Chair, if I may add to that real quickly. This is the first of a series of some budget reduction items in Medi-Cal. And I just wanted to note, as far as some general context, that without the federal offsets and without our proposed reductions, we're really talking about a base program of about $16 billion general fund that's been growing at about 8% per year in Medi-Cal. There are about $500 million of reductions that both houses denied that are not in conference. And to us, it's just unclear how we balance the budget and deal with the ongoing deficit without significant reductions in this area.
Yeah, we get cost containment. It's just some of the proposed reductions didn't make as much sense. But anyway, the options issues. Mr. Blumenfield?
Technical, how much of this is sort of a check writing delay and how much of it is a policy change?
Sure. So there are, the issue that we always have to deal with when beneficiaries are moved into managed care is that their fee-for-service payments for services provided are paid after they receive the service. And so there's sort of a lag there. And so as beneficiaries transition, you have this overlap where you begin making capitated payments and you're still making the fee-for-service payments. And so that's how we've proposed to fund this, is to defer one capitated payment. So the savings here is really all from deferring the capitated payment.
It's all, there's no other policy in this money. It's all the what I'm calling a check writing delay, but it's a capitated payment delay.
It's similar to a check write delay that happens within the fee for service side.
But it's not the policy side. And in that case, do we lose I mean, I know that when we do a reduction like this, we lose a certain amount of general fund and a certain amount of equal amount of federal funds.
Right.
Is that somehow different? I mean, are we losing the federal funds, or is the delay not? Can we bring the federal funds in the day before and then delay the payment the next day, or is it
the federal funds come when we make the payment? So it's not a case where we could receive the federal funds before we make the payment. And so our proposal is still to make
no check kiting. It's just check writing. Okay.
So, but because now in the long term, we do believe there are some savings that are achievable by moving these populations into managed care. But because in the budget year there's this overlap between the lagged fee-for-service payments and the capitated payments, we don't believe that savings from that change would start materializing in the budget year.
The big savings in this are from the policy change that was enacted last year, is actually the deal here.
Exactly, but it will take several years to that be fully implemented.
It's a phased-in policy change, and that change will get incorporated in some fashion in the 1115 waiver, in theory, and in the new health care reform stuff in a way that, in the long run, in theory, probably isn't a lot of new money, really, for us. I mean, a lot of savings in the absolute dollar sense, but it's savings in the ability to serve more people with less dollars, I suspect, is really where the savings are. It's the population will be there, we'll serve it, but as we have been, are we still 51st out of 50 states in our Medi-Cal per capita? We have been for years. I mean, Washington, D.C. has its own program. It isn't really a joke. And they always were, everybody paid more than we did. Are we still in that place?
We're certainly near the bottom. I don't know exactly where we are.
Yeah, I don't know that we're 51st, but we're
48th.
Yeah, something in that range.
We did some rate increases in managed care.
Per capita.
It's because we went to managed care before a lot of other folks did. That's now the new wave. But we have been very cost effective on a per capita basis. We are the most. We spend the most money on Medicaid of any state, but we also have been the most effective per capita. And I mean, the motion to move this direction is a way of continuing to serve Medi-Cal patients, but have the cost of it contained. I mean, in theory, moving folks into the managed care is going to help us continue to serve them without. So it's a savings, but it's a kind of a, I don't know, it's a savings, but in some ways not a cut. But and did Mr. Nielsen, did I see your hand up? Mr. Lano?
Thank you, Madam Chair. To either finance or to LAO, clearly the goal here is to improve care and to contain costs. Fair enough? So can you tell us about standards that will be used to reach the goal of improved care, and how will we evaluate those standards?
So we're talking about the standards that will be put into place for the managed care plans. Certainly that's something that we are developing and have developed. I don't know if at the committee's pleasure, there are representatives from the department here that could provide much more insight than I could.
Sure. Understand that. LAO, any comments?
I just note that the department's intent, as noted in their budget change proposal related to the 1115 waiver, mentioned that they are going to look at implementing a number of the California Healthcare Foundation recommendations regarding performance measures and whatnot, and that these will likely be addressed in the policy bill.
There is a policy bill moving on this.
Right. I just wanted to underscore the importance of the devil being the details here. For example, especially with seniors and people with disabilities have special needs, and we're going to tell a senior citizen or someone in a wheelchair that this is their doctor, but are we going to also let them know for certain that the office will be accessible for the wheelchair? So a lot of detail here.
Right.
And accessibility is something that we are working on, and is something that is important as we roll out this effort to move these populations into managed care. We're also working on continuity of care issues where patients would be able to maintain their same providers as they transition, and they would be able to maintain their same providers indefinitely if those providers accept the rates the plan pays. And so we're working then on, if the provider doesn't want to accept that rate, then how long can they maintain the provider before they transition?
Do we know if the policy bill defines terms such as medical home or care coordination?
They're working on that.
That's still a work in progress. Okay.
All right, Mr. Blumenfield.
Well, I worry, how much are we locking in? If we take these savings, are we, boxing in the policy bill or prematurely? That's what I worry about on this, in terms of if we lock this in, because the devil really is in the details, and aren't we limiting the choices to some extent? As out of the LAO, or
I don't think so.
Well, the savings comes from deferring the capitated payment, and in our view, that's something that the plans are okay with, because they're going to get a significant influx of beneficiaries over time. I don't think we're locking ourselves into any of this specific oversight that Senator Leno is referencing, nor are we necessarily locking ourselves into X number of beneficiaries will transition by, say, the end of the budget year. But it is a signal that we do intend to move towards managed care for these populations.
Well, and doesn't that help? I mean, I know for the last couple of years, because we started sort of trying to move people voluntarily into seniors and, getting the plans ready, moving people voluntarily as much as possible over the last couple, 3 years, and sending the signal that we're moving that way for real by next year might help migrate. I mean, it could result in actually more savings because as folks figure out the providers that provide accessibility, the ones that are serving people now, and work them into the plans, then you can start moving people over there voluntarily, not just mandatorily, and start to possibly see some savings from that too, right? Because people are still available to that. As you do the planning for the process, as you do the stakeholder part, as you figure out which doctors are going to get into the networks, you start to make the managed care plan more available to people. It becomes more likely that you do it. But anyway, Ms. Skinner.
Not necessarily speaking for everyone, but I think most of us would like to be able to score the savings. But what our concern is are we, in scoring the savings, also making a policy shift that hasn't yet been fully vetted by our policy committees? So I don't know.
This is signed legislation from last year. This is implementing something that was signed last year, right?
Right. This is AB6.
It is part of the 1115 waiver still, and that bill still has to move. But that's incorporating something that we took action on and is a signed law today, signed last year.
Right. Moving these populations into managed care was a part of AB6 of the 4th Extraordinary Session, so a trailer bill to the budget last July.
Whatever. If you need to leave it open to understand better, it's fine. But
The waiver's still being developed now through policy.
separately. But this piece, which is already settled law in California, will be a component part of that waiver. But, right, under the administration's proposal and just about everybody's analysis of where we're going, the mandatory enrollment in managed care is a component part of the waiver.
Right.
But it was authority to do it, not how we do it, right?
Right. The details of exactly how it's going to happen is a part of an ongoing stakeholder process, and something that's
and is subject to legislation.
And subject to legislation.
So while the authority came in last year, the actually doing of the legislation, as Ms. Skinner was pointing out, is going to happen this year. And that's where the devil is in the details.
Right. And I don't think this proposal would commit us to any of those details. That's still subject to the policy determination.
That's why we moved the trailer bill to policy. We didn't do a trailer bill on this.
It still will be vetted through the policy committee. This doesn't tie you any more than what you've already committed to, which is moving these people into managed care. And so the details will still be vetted, and there'll be an opportunity to influence those.
Mr. Nielsen?
Madam Chair, the details are always worked out. I mean, that will happen on the go. The law is in place. And one of the imperatives is we've got to get a budget. And this is an item that's significant in the budget. I would argue that we should move this along into the budget. There will be further policy development to refine things, but I don't think it prejudices since the decision has already been made to transition into managed care. I would argue we need to move this along. I'd be prepared to respectfully offer a motion.
Senator Huff?
So Senate, look at the Senate.
I just want to say, I support the Senate position. I think Senator Dutton does also. We're in the minority party here, but we trust the process and going to policy. I think that's a proper place to do it and work this out. So I don't know what the Assembly's concern is on this, really, because it should get us where we need to go. We can score the savings and make sure it works best for all those involved.
Okay, we're gonna go with that. Scoring the savings, we just want to make it clear the savings are really just the check writing procedure.
Pretty much. I mean, it's because you have to phase it that way.
Check write delay.
So, Mr. Nielsen moves the Senate version.
Yes.
Hearing no objection on a 5-0 vote, that will be adopted. All right. Page 9. Another trailer bill. We have lots of those in health care. All right, what did we do? The finance, this is your trailer bill?
So AB 1383, which was enacted last year, created a hospital fee, and
we need to keep it.
That fee provides revenue used to match federal funds and provide supplemental payments to hospitals, and also provided $80 million per quarter available for children's health services. The administration has proposed a couple of things related to this legislation. One is to extend it 6 months. It's scheduled to sunset December 31st of this year, and we've proposed to extend it 6 months, consistent with an expected extension of enhanced Medicaid funding.
Cross our fingers. I heard. Did it get in the Senate bill this week? Does anybody know?
It is in the Senate bill.
All right.
They haven't had from what the latest I hear is they expect a floor vote in the Senate next week.
Oh, please. That would be wonderful. Okay, next.
And so that would bring the total amount available for children's coverage to $720 million, and we have proposed using that as a general fund offset for children's services provided within the Medi-Cal program. Here, I believe the Assembly action redirected $30 million to the Healthy Families program to fund restoration of vision benefits and to buy out proposed premium increases. So the net impact of the Senate...
That's a different issue. This is just about the extension of the...
Oh, we're only hearing the extension here?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're not proposing any changes in policy as a part of our proposal, and so we would support the Senate action.
Elio?
We would also support the Senate action as it is the implementing trailer bill to achieve the savings related to this extension.
Mr. Nielsen? You're okay with the Senate? Senator Huff? Senate? So you're on Assembly? Pardon? What did you want? This is the governor's trailer bill.
Matt?
Senator Huff?
Yeah, we haven't received federal approval yet on how we're doing this, right? So, or is there an update that someone can give us? Flipping to the right page, Arvin?
Flip through my notes here. All right, I do have an update available. The department is continuing to work with the federal government on obtaining approval for the hospital fee. We remain optimistic that approval will be provided. Federal law does allow states to assess provider fees that are not specifically broad-based, as long as they meet specific standards. One of those is statistical correlation that demonstrates there's not a direct relationship between the payments a hospital received and the fee level it is assessed, and that the fee cannot contain a hold harmless provision, which means that there are going to be winners and losers under Medicaid provider fee. We have provided information to the federal government that justifies why it meets these provisions. And CMS has raised some concerns, but the department, with assistance from the Hospital Association, has provided the analytical data, and we're committed to working with CMS through these issues and remain optimistic that it will be approved.
Thank you for that.
Okay, so real simple. The simple answer is that no, we haven't received any federal approval, and you think it looks optimistic.
We need
that we're going to get it.
Right.
At the end of the day,
boils it down. Yes.
Is that what it boils down to?
And therefore, we're scoring a savings.
Yes.
On an odd note.
The LAO is optimistic. Oh yeah, she's very optimistic. Actually,
smiles. Yeah.
Optimism abounds here. This is nice.
Well, it does seem like the trailer bill actually belongs in policy, but
Yeah.
Skinner?
The Assembly version approves the fund shift. It just, as you indicated, allows the trailer bill to go through the process that it's in the midst of right now. So I think.
But you don't get the savings unless you extend the sunset. So
well, we don't. We also don't get it if the federal, if we don't get the.
Well, but then you can't score. I mean, without the trailer bill that extends the sunset, there are no savings. Period.
Well, there's not. There's.
You can do that by majority vote in a policy bill, though, right? So you don't have to get it hung up in
Except then you can't score the savings in the budget. I'm with Mr. Nielsen on this one. It's like, give me a budget first.
Assumptions here. I don't know.
All right.
Stop it.
Go ahead. Start over. Yes. Finance? It's your trailer bill. You defend it. All right.
The existing statute provides for 7 quarters of the fee, and so the issue in question here is the proposed extension, which has $160 million general fund value. We believe it's an appropriate trailer bill issue because it is directly related to budget savings, and we're not proposing any policy changes to the bill that was previously enacted, simply an extension of sunset dates.
Madam Chair?
All right. Mr. Lano?
Just to my colleagues who, I think this is a different situation from when we see changes in policy, that we've been consistent and keep those discussions in the policy committee. This does not change any policy of the original Jones bill. It just extends the sunset. It's purely budget matter. It's not about policy. If it were, I would agree with you. We should send it. We would need the policy bill. This is just a budget issue extending a sunset of 6 months so we can take the general fund savings of the $160 million.
Right.
LAO, is that right? Thank you.
And we would also note that in addition to the general fund savings, it will provide a significant additional federal funding to provide supplemental payments to our hospitals.
Right. That's the issue. I mean, we can leave it open if you need to talk about it, but I don't see any other objections.
We'll move forward.
Yeah, no.
Bob, we were ready to fold.
All right, hospital rate freeze. This is probably open to go with the 11:15 discussion. Is that? Wait, is there a compromise floating around? Rate freeze. What are we talking about here? LAO, explain this one just so everybody knows what we're talking about.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The governor's proposal is a decrease in total funds of $169 million, $84.5 million general fund by imposing a rate freeze on Medi-Cal inpatient hospital rates paid to all hospitals except for designated public hospitals at the rate that was in effect January 1st, and there's also a trailer bill associated with this. We would recommend the Assembly version on this, given the state's fiscal situation.
Okay, they approved it. And what does it do? Sorry, rate freeze on Cal Finance?
This proposal would freeze rates for all hospitals except for designated public hospitals at the January 1, 2010 level.
Even if you get the hospital fee and associated
The
money
hospital
from
fee
the
is a
prior
supplemental payment. Our proposal would freeze the per diem rates. So we believe that this is a legally defensible proposal because of the significant supplemental payments that will be available to these hospitals.
Even on a retroactive basis, Ledge Council?
We could look into the issue for you about the retroactive application of that.
I mean, how different is this from the 15 lawsuits we lost to doctors on rate freezes in the last 5 years?
In our opinion, the difference would be that those physicians or other providers were not about to receive significant additional funding through a separate provider fee. So even though their per diem rate will stay constant, total funding provided through Medi-Cal to these hospitals will increase with the fee.
And when you say to accept, why do we get to accept the public hospitals? I mean, why don't we treat them all the same?
No general fund is used for public hospitals. They're funded through their certified public expenditures and federal funds.
I see. So this is all on DISH. Is that? Oh, no, this isn't their DISH. This is their base rate.
Right. This is their per diem rate.
Whether in Medicare, managed care or not, or is this a?
Right. It would be a freeze for all contract and non-contract hospitals.
Well, I know there is issues here. I know the governor's back east talking to Secretary Sebelius, I think, this week or soon. And this whole 1115, this goes in that context, right? We're trying to get the hospital fee approved. We're trying to get some of those things all at the same time. Right.
This would not violate the hospital fee. The hospital fee created a maintenance of effort that said you couldn't lower rates, and so we proposed to simply freeze them rather than lower them.
So did we raise them since January that's causing us to have to go retroactively try to freeze them? I mean, I don't kind of get the retroactivity. If we're freezing them at wherever they are today, then that's what they are, but I don't get the January piece. Elio?
I'd have to get back to you on that issue. I'm not clear exactly the retroactivity.
Yeah, we'd have to get back to
All right,
the
why don't you all
retroactivity.
circle on that, talk to Ledge Council. The legality is a little dicey. Oh, Mr. Nielsen, sorry.
If we're going to put it over, would you also be prepared to come back and talk to us about litigation proofing? So many times we take actions around here, and it's like just banging your head against the wall. We just do it so it feels good and invite the litigation, and we lose. And I understand this one has kind of turned on a requirement that the federal statutory factors have to be studied and reported and analyzed, and we lose on that basis. Also come back, what can we do in language or action, in process action now, to ensure that when the lawsuit comes, we're better defended? Instead of just slam dunk, the judge looks at it and said, you lose by enjoined. Let's do some things in our language and on our actions that allow us to realize the policy and the savings that we're intending. Can we do that?
Mr. Nielsen, to address the legality issue, I'll just note that the governor's proposed trailer bill does include the possible need to do a rate study to justify this proposal.
Possible need, or it will be done?
I'd have to check exactly, but the department has indicated that a rate study may need to be done to justify the proposal.
But could not a department initiate such a study, even in advance, preemptive action, instead of just waiting around, oh, well, gee, we didn't get around to it, so we lost the lawsuit?
After we get sued, then we'll just study.
Yeah,
if we need a rate study to do a rate freeze, let's just do one.
Can we build something in that instructs the department to begin such a study, for example? Effectively the signing of the budget.
Yeah.
And then a court looks at it, well, gee whiz, they've complied, it's in process, but give us something hard on that. I don't want to give up on this point. We need to do what we possibly can legally to be preemptive so we don't get knocked down every bloody time and lose all these savings.
Exactly. Thank you. Senator Dutton.
Yeah, to put it simply, I want to know, instead of it being defendable, I want to know how it's winnable. Okay, I don't want to defend it. I want to win it. All right, so.
Think about it. All right, next, page 11. We will come back to that one when everybody's got more information. This is similarly related, reduction to the public hospitals. Again, related to the waiver issue, right? Is that finance?
On page 12?
Yeah. 11, sorry. 11.
We're on page 11?
Yeah, well, there's two of them in a row. Why don't you talk about them both together, and then we're probably going to break. So let's take those two together. Yes. Senator Lowenthal.
That was such an interesting discussion about from the Assemblymember Nielsen. I just wondered from Ledge Council, when are we going to hear whether this is defensible or not? Whether it's legal? Whether we can do a retroactive rate
Hopefully
freeze?
within the next week, so
That's
we
what
can
I want
close
to
our
know.
budget out.
Will you tell us?
They'll all come back together. They'll circle together.
But we will know that within a few.
We'll know their opinion of it. We don't know the court's opinion of it till we get there. All right. Page 11 and 12, why don't you take those two together, because they're pretty much the same, and I suspect they're going to both get held open. So,
All right. Issues 11 and 12 would continue policies enacted as a part of the last budget. In the last budget, we reduced safety net care pool payments to designated public hospitals by 10%, and the state retains those funds to claim against certain state-only programs. And that's a savings of about $30 million in 10-11, and then some of this would spill over into 11-12, so it would be another $24 million in 11-12. And issue 12 relates to private hospitals. We provide disproportionate share hospital payments to private hospitals as supplemental payments, and this would be a 10% reduction in state general fund that is contributed towards those payments and would be a $25.8 million savings.
LAO, there's some issue here with respect to voluntary contributions, changing the language.
There's in federal legislation, they've said we can't increase the voluntary contribution. That would relate to the designated public hospitals. However, right now, they are funded 100% through their local certified public expenditures and federal funds, so there's no state contribution that goes to that. So their contribution would maintain at 100%. It wouldn't be able to increase. So we believe that this reduction can be made and is in compliance with federal law.
And then how does the private hospitals piece work? Is it the same? Well,
that issue doesn't apply to the private hospitals.
That's the LAO on the public hospital issue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Given that this is an extension of an existing reduction and the state's fiscal situation, we are recommending the Assembly version on both of these issues.
And how does it relate to the waiver, anybody?
As a part of the new waiver, we are negotiating to maintain safety net care pool funding, and so the proposed savings here assumes that safety net care pool funding would be continued at the same level under the new waiver.
And how likely is that?
We believe that's very likely as a baseline. Currently, it's $586 million per year, and we believe as a baseline amount. We're working to advocate for significant additional money. So this is simply an assumption that it stays at minimum at the current level.
LAO, you're with them on this? Right.
Question.
All right. LAO. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Skinner.
It's hard to fully understand the impacts with the limited information that we have before us. I have two of the hospitals that would be affected in my district, Brookside and Richmond and Children's. And what kind of impact would these 10% cuts be on patient care and treatment? And do we have any? We already heard mention of concern about when we act, lawsuits, and do we have any sense of whether this would generate a lawsuit right away?
These are continuations of policies enacted to achieve savings in the current year. There have not been any lawsuits on those issues, so we don't believe there's any legal risk by continuing these policies. In terms of the impact, this would be on the public hospital side. This would be a reduction of about $2.6 million per public hospital. So they receive, so that's a 10% reduction on average. And then on the private hospital side, we've estimated an impact of approximately $500,000 per hospital.
So it's $2.6 million per public hospital?
On average.
And how much of the private only $500,000?
$500,000. Again, this is on average. Some hospitals will be impacted more and some less.
All right. On both of these issues, I'm thinking, somehow in the context of the 1115 conversation that we started earlier, all of these hospital issues and rate issues need to be packaged somehow. I don't kind of know. And we do need word back on this legalities issues of some of these phrases and making sure we're setting this up. I know we won't have the 1115 waiver done before we have a budget, we hope. Hopefully we will have a budget before the 1115 waiver in August. If we have to wait till then, it's kind of not pretty. But on the other hand, if we're going to do it before we have that in our hands, we got to figure out how to structure the budget so we can adapt to what happens with that waiver. I think that's our challenge, is how do you do a budget before you have it in your hands and know what federal dollars you're getting. We'll get some signals.
And if I could also comment on that with the waiver, that even with these proposed to continue these 10% reductions, we are looking to get significant additional federal funding for our hospitals under the waiver and also through the hospital fee that should
which we're also
help
seeking approval for.
Stabilize them financially. Right.
Is there a chance we'll get that approved before we have to go through all the waiver? Can they approve the hospital fee now before the waiver thing, or it's only part of the waiver?
They're on separate tracks.
So we could get the hospital fee approved.
Right.
That would be hugely helpful. Okay.
Well, one last comment is, I, for one, at least would want to have in trailer bill language, if we proceed on this, at least some kind of impact report on the impact on patients and patient care.
see what we can scout up from the Hospital Association. All right, we're at page 12. We've talked about hospitals till we're tired of them. And it is 12:30, and at least I had a conference call I need to get on, and I think some people may want lunch. So hold on one second. Let's just see when we want to. Okay. Just to accommodate all the different little things and meetings and briefings that are going on, we would reconvene at 3:30, members, if that works for folks. Give us chances to brief, staff chance to do whatever. Expect a later evening tonight, members, then, though, if we're not coming back till then. I suspect, I really would like to get through health today, so at least, and I had hoped to get to at least the education overview. It may mean 7 o'clock or more. I mean, we'll take a couple breaks for back stretches if we have to, but we don't want to do action items tomorrow, and then we'll meet probably tomorrow morning for a little while, but we'll talk about that. So for right now, we'll break until 3:30 and come back. Expect to be here into the evening, though, tonight.